Welcome to Network Africa. I'm Joke Rogers. Coming up on the program, the Nigerian army dismisses claims by Amnesty International about destroying massacre evidence. We have the latest from Amnesty International. Then the United States promises to continue to help Nigeria to locate the Chibok girls. And later we'll bring you our Africa Tech segment. Today we're looking at preventing cybercrime. Welcome to the program. Amnesty International is pointing fingers at the Nigerian army for the death of hundreds of men, women and children from a minority Shiite Muslim sect last December. According to the rights group, more than 350 people were believed to have been unlawfully killed by the military between December 12th and 14th. Amnesty also explained that it carried out a research in February 2016 during which 92 people were interviewed, including alleged victims and their relatives, eyewitnesses, lawyers and medical staff. Meanwhile, the Nigerian army has vehemently refuted the group's claims, saying the report is hasty, one-sided and biased and is aimed at arriving at a predetermined objective. We're still talking security in Nigeria. The United States has reiterated its commitment to help the country fight terrorists. Well, during a meeting with campaigners for the rescue of the Chibok girls, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Samantha Power, explained that the United States will focus more on dealing with the Boko Haram sect, economic trade and humanitarian assistance to Nigeria.
To Nigeria as the American ambassador to the United Nations on Boko Haram, but we know the partnership is so much bigger than that. We also know that it will be the fruits of the other aspects of our partnership also that will help us most in dealing with Boko Haram: trade, economic development, the strengthening of institutions and the fight that you are waging against corruption. All of these are intrinsically essential for the people of Nigeria who want to live in security and dignity and have maximum opportunity. And they're all critical for dealing with the emergency situation, namely the threat posed by Boko Haram.
Well, let's take a closer look at that Amnesty report. And joining us is the author, that's Donatella Rivera. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Right. The Nigerian army has criticized the Amnesty International report, saying it lacks objectivity and was done in a haste. How would you like to respond to that?
Well, it's hardly hasty. It has been 4 months and 10 days since the Nigeria army committed that shocking and terrible massacre. The report that we published today contains information that we were able to gather during our time in Nigeria, not only the testimonies of victims and relatives of victims, but also residents of the neighborhood, witnesses who are not supporters of the Islamic movement of Nigeria. Indeed, many of them are hostile to the IMN. We also visited the sites of the incidents, because there are several sites. We met with authorities, including the Nigerian army, and we took into account the information and the evidence from all of these different sources. We also visited the site of the alleged mass grave, which the Kaduna State Authority admitted to for the very first time only last week, 4 months after the incident. And we acquired satellite imagery that support our suspicion of where this mass grave is located. And all of this actually tallies with the declaration of the Kaduna state government. So you know, the evidence is there. It's on the public record. I think that if the Nigerian army believes that we have made any allegations that are factually inaccurate, it should actually specifically state what in the report is factually inaccurate, as opposed to just this kind of general claim, because our report is full of facts. So if they have any issue with any particular fact and they can show that those facts are inaccurate, we would welcome to hear from them.
The people that Amnesty International spoke to, all the witnesses and you know, the government officials and others, eyewitnesses, family members, victims that you said you spoke to, how credible are they in helping Amnesty back these claims?
Well, look, ultimately testimonies are testimonies, and they have to be taken for what they are, and they have to be considered alongside the material evidence. Certainly, I mean, you know, we spoke to and interviewed 92 people who don't know each other. They were interviewed separately in separate locations. So it would be the most extraordinary coincidence if they all, you know, were saying, relating the same incident, and it wasn't true. I mean, there is actually not that much dispute between, I mean, you know, the Nigeria army published some video at the time, and he gave it to us also when we were there in February, which shows the protesters on the road. A small percentage of those protesters had machetes and knives and batons. And then it doesn't show anything else. So until today, the Nigerian army has brought no evidence whatsoever that there was an attempted attack on the Chief of Army Staff. Secondly, what's very important to note is that actually what happened on the Sokoto Road at the beginning of the incident is actually the smallest issue in terms of victims. The Nigerian army said that 7 people were killed at that time, and the INM alleges that some more people were killed. But actually the biggest number of people who were killed by the army were killed much later, that night and the following day. It had nothing to do with any attack on the Chief of Army Staff. I mean, the Chief of Army Staff had passed many hours earlier. It was when the soldiers went and surrounded the compound of the IMN leader in the Jalesu neighborhood, when they surrounded the IMN headquarters, the Hosseiniya on Sokoto Road. It is there during the night, and especially the following day on Sunday the 13th, that hundreds of people were killed. I mean, we spoke to the residents of Jayesu, the neighborhood, who said that they heard the army firing for the whole night, and continuing to do so the following day. So this was a law and order situation that should have been dealt with by the police with non-lethal crowd control means. This is not, there wasn't a war to be dealt with as some sort of combat situation.
Right.
But the most important thing is actually there is one party, and one party only, which has destroyed and removed evidence. And that party is the Nigerian army and the Nigerian state, because, you know, there were the buildings into which the Nigerian army had fired an enormous amount of firepower. That was incredibly precious evidence. There were the bodies Why on earth did they pick up 347 bodies and went to bury them in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere? These people have families. The families should have been allowed to identify. There should have been autopsies carried out on this body. There should have been ballistic examination carried out on the buildings. Instead, they bulldozed them. So, you know, there is the crime, the big crime, which is the massacre, but there is another crime, which is the crime of having destroyed the evidence deliberately.
This is not the first time that your organization is alleging wrongdoing on the part of the Nigerian army. How would you like to see things play out regarding this case?
Well, I mean, as I said, the key problem, you know, obviously the terrible slaughter having been committed, then what was most important was to preserve the evidence, to carry out a thorough and independent and impartial investigation, which should have started immediately, not months after, when all the evidence had been removed and destroyed. So this is the biggest problem. I mean, obviously, there is the Judicial Commission of Inquiry, which has been set up by the Kaduna state government, and there is the inquiry from the National Human Rights Commission, and there are inquiries from the Nigerian Bar Associations and others. And these are important initiatives. Those initiatives are ongoing. We don't know what the outcome will be. Our concern is that up to now, up to today, if one looks at other mass killings, including mass killings that were then, where the victims were then dumped in mass graves by the Nigerian army, there has been no step taken to bring to book, to hold accountable the perpetrators. The perpetrators have been allowed to get away with murder, quite literally. That impunity, that blanket impunity, which has been afforded to members of the military and members of other forces, which have committed very grave abuses, including mass killings, no doubt encourages further abuses from being committed. So it is very, very important that the Nigerian army and any other authorities, civilian authorities, state authorities that participated in the cover-up, so those authorities that participated in the secret burial of the bodies, those authorities that participated in and carried out the bulldozing of the buildings, destroying the evidence, all of these authorities need to come clean. They need to do so now. Let us not forget that last week the information was given for the first time, 4 months later, that 347 bodies of men, women and children were secretly buried at night in a mass grave. The exact location of that mass grave has not been given. I visited the specific site, and I got the GPS coordinates, and on the basis of that we obtained satellite imagery, and the location is in Mando, which is the location identified by the Kaduna State
all right,
government official.
We're going to have to...
So they need to come clean.
We're going to have to stop it there, Donatella. Thank you.
Specifically where it is.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. Very informative information there. Thank you for your thoughts on this issue. The Amnesty International's Donatella Rivera talking about the report on the Nigerian army.